Welcome to the Beautifully Broken podcast, designed to bring purpose to the broken through the words of our testimonies. Our prayer is to bring forgiveness, healing, and deliverance to others through the power of our testimonies and God's Word. It's time to raise up beautifully broken women who can live in His goodness daily, break generational curses, and live out His purpose for their lives. And I'm your host, Stephanie Bullock. Now let's dig in. It was December the 2nd. It was a Saturday. It was a misty, rainy type day, overcast, dreary. We didn't have a lot planned, but I had my normal 10 o'clock coffee Saturday morning meeting with some of the ladies from the church. And then I had some errands to run in town. My middle son, Addison, was working that morning at the coffee shop that we were going to that day. He's a barista there, or was a barista there. And when I got done with running my errands in town, I came back to the red light that was at the intersection of the coffee shop that he worked at and noticed the time and that he was probably already off work. I knew that he might go work out after work. And so I just looked to see where he was on Life 360, which I still do that. Most of our children are grown and on their own, but we still like to just, for safety reasons, know where they are. The 17-year-old, I still have to look and make sure he's where he's supposed to be. That's a whole nother story. But anyway, I got to looking and saw that he was at the gym. So I was like, okay, he's going to work out and then he'll be home. So anyway, the light turns green. I make my way home and I get home and I notice that the youngest son, Walker, and his dad are at my house. They had come to get some hunting gear. They were going to go do some hunting later that day. And so I pull into the driveway and it was 12:56 and Walker was walking out of the house with his hunting gear and he was getting back in the car with his dad and they were going to be going back to his dad's house. So I go on inside and I had gotten a rotisserie chicken from Walmart and was deboning it. I was going to eat it for lunch. I really don't remember. I was probably going to make some chicken salad with it because I love doing that. Like I said, I got home at 12:56. At 1:03, my phone rang and it was Walker. And he said it as calmly and in the same tone as I'm about to say it to you. He said, "Hey, Addison has had a wreck up here, up the road. He's okay, but you may want to ride up here." I said, okay. I didn't ask any more questions. I got off the phone. I finished with the chicken I had in my hands. I pushed the chicken back off the counter so the dogs wouldn't get into it. I think I even popped a piece in my mouth. I was starving. It was 1:02 or 1:03, what I say, 1:03 at this point. And my husband, Chaston, comes through and I said, "Hey, Walker just called. Addison's been in a wreck up the road. I'm going to ride up there." He said he was okay. He said, "Do you want me to go with you?" And I said, "No, Walker said he was fine." And he acted pretty calm. So it's probably just a fender bender. It's raining. And so he said, okay. So I pushed the chicken back and walked to grab my purse and casually walked out to the car. So I get in my car and I'm driving down the road and I realize I don't even know where the accident is at this point, but I was like, I'm sure I'll see it. And so I drive and I get to a point on the main road that they were on, and it's a straightaway and then it kind of goes into a curve. And when I came around the curve, I could see cars pulled over. I could see people, lots of people. There were people directing traffic. And then I saw the car and the car was upside down. That is when I began to panic just a little bit. I immediately kind of put my foot to the pedal and turned into the side driveway. I threw my car in park, threw open the door, and I ran around. I didn't even shut my door. I didn't turn the car off, anything. Thank God I remembered to put it in park. And I come running around and I could see the car upside down, but I couldn't see anybody working on him. I couldn't see him. I couldn't see people. I couldn't see his dad. I couldn't see his brother. And I wasn't hearing anything. I just remember coming around my car and I remember there were a few people on the hill standing and the people in the road. And I just remember screaming. I was like, "Where is he? Where is he?" And the people over here said, he's down here, he's on the ground. They're trying to hold him down. And so I run around, and it's an embankment, okay? So I'm running on the embankment, and I come around where I can see, and all of a sudden, as soon as I could see him and the people that were trying to hold him down, I could hear. And I could hear him moaning and groaning and grunting and moving. He was fighting the people that were trying to hold him down. And I remember just seeing there were blood all over people. His head was gashed open. I could see white, which I know now was his skull, or the meat protecting the skull. And he was, I don't know all the medical terms. He was conscious, but he wasn't conscious. He was grunting and fighting, but his eyes were closed, and he was not verbally talking or anything like that. Like, he literally was just in fight or flight mode. He didn't want to be held down, obviously, because he was in pain and he didn't know what was going on, I assume. But his body was just in fight mode, and he was literally fighting. And I told you that he had been to the gym. He was, in the prime of his life, athletic, played sports, played college sports. He works out, so he was very, very strong. And it was, I think there were 7 or 8 people just trying to hold him down. And his dad the whole time was like, "Son, I need you to be still. We don't know what's wrong with you. We don't know if you are, we don't know what's going on. You have got to be still. You've got to." Of course, he wasn't comprehending what anyone was saying, so he just kept fighting them, and he was moving arms, legs, everything. And I come around the corner, and I'm like, now I think, how stupid was that? But I said, "What's wrong with him?" And now I think to myself, well, you idiot, he just had a rollover 1-car accident. What do you think's wrong with him? But it was just me reacting. And then about that time, and I was going to go down there to him, and about that time I could feel my legs, and they were giving out. And about that time, thank goodness, one of the men that was there, he could see what was happening, and he came and he was about to catch me, and he pulled a piece of the car for me to sit on because I said it was raining, and so it was muddy and it was wet. The ground was wet, and he brought it was like the felt from the trunk of the car that had come out, and he came and he put it underneath me, and he said, "Why don't you sit down for just a minute and kind of gather your thoughts?" I was like, "Yeah, maybe I should do that." I was like, "I can't go down there. I can't go down there." And I mean, now granted, I'm not a good measurer. I'm probably 25 feet from them. So I mean, I'm close, but I'm not up on him. And I don't even know what all I'm saying, but I'm saying things like, "What's wrong with him? What happened?" Of course, nobody knows any of these answers. Nobody's trying to answer me. They're all rhetorical questions, but I'm like just trying to figure out what in the heck to do. I finally realized that my baby son, his brother who had called me, was in his dad's car behind me. And I turned around and I said, "You said he was fine." And he said, "That's what they told me to tell you." And I was like, "Okay, rightfully so, maybe." And I was like, "Oh no, I need to call my husband." And I like pulled my phone out of my pocket. I called Chaston and I said, "Hey, it's bad. I need you now." And I hung up. I didn't even tell him where it was. I didn't tell him what was going on. He didn't know how bad. So then I was like, somebody said something about maybe give him some water, talking about Addison. And I said, "I've got water in the car." And I start to get up, and they said, "No, you sit down. We will go get it." I said, "It's in the trunk." So they run and get water, bring it back. I take it down there. Kyle tries to give him water. Of course, again, he's moving and he's groaning and moaning, but he is not conscious enough to like talk to us or even think to swallow water. So we try to give him water. Of course, that doesn't work. He won't drink it. We're still constantly just saying, "We need you to be still. We need you to be still." I go back up and sit. And then I'm like, "Where's the ambulance? Like, did anybody call the ambulance at this point?" Because it seems like an eternity, and it probably wasn't. Well, about that time, I can hear the ambulance coming, and they get there. 2 paramedics get out, and they take the backboard down there. And it literally takes 7 men and 2 paramedics to get him on the board because he was not having it, and then up to the ambulance, and they get him in. And of course, they're like, "You can't ride." And I guess it's just because of the emotional state I was in. Well, about that time, my husband gets there, and he comes over, and the first thing I say to him is, "They won't let me ride in the ambulance." Well, what you may not know about my husband is he was a professional firefighter and paramedic for over 20 years. He has medical knowledge, and he understands and has been on scenes like that before. And, at this point, I'm kind of relying on him because I'm thinking, I don't even know if my son's going to live. I don't know if he's okay. I don't know if he's got a traumatic brain injury that is going to leave him some kind of way. He sees me, makes sure, and I'm okay. I mean, I'm shaking, but I'm not like acting a fool at this point, but I'm visibly emotionally distraught. And my ex-husband, his dad, is now standing up here with blood all over him because he helped finish pulling him out of the car. Chasten talks to Kyle for a second and the dad, and then Chasten opens the back of the ambulance and he says, "Hey, Chasten Bullock, I'm the bonus dad, paramedic for 20 years. And they said, you're riding with us." Well, found out later that, so Chasten got to ride with Addison in the ambulance to the hospital. And I found out later that it took all three of them to hold Addison down so they could get an IV in him to calm him down. In fact, if I remember correctly, they still weren't able to get him sedated enough even after they'd gotten to the hospital, because I remember Chasten saying that once they got in the hospital, they were still trying to hold him down for certain things or what have you, or maybe they couldn't sedate him before they ran tests. I'm not sure. I'm not in the medical profession. I don't know why all of this was happening the way in the order that it was, but I just remember that even at the hospital, he was still kind of fighting them, and to the point that they were trying to hold him down and do this and do that. And Chasten actually wound up elbowing one of the doctors or headbutting one of the doctors or something. I can't remember. And it was kind of a funny, in the middle of a chaotic situation. Nonetheless, Chasten rode to the hospital, to King's Daughter Hospital with them, which I was glad. And I got in the car with Walker rode with me. Kyle had already gone on. I'm not sure why Walker rode with me and not Kyle, but it doesn't matter. And we get to the hospital. And of course, you have to go in and you have to give them insurance information and stuff like that. And so I'm still calm enough that I'm able to drive. I was able to make a couple of phone calls. Like I called the bonus mom. I called the girlfriend. I called the brother, the big older brother that was at college. I called somebody from the church, and I called my dad. By the time we got to the hospital, I'd made those phone calls, and I was like, I need y'all to call everybody else. I can't do it. Y'all call everybody else and get them to praying. I don't know anything. It's just a really bad accident. I'll let you know when we know more. We get in, they take us into the office. They want, insurance, names, social security numbers, blood types, all but pricking my finger and taking blood themselves. Chasten comes from the back to in the room with us, with Kyle and I, and the lady takes a break from asking questions, and I look over to Chasten and I said, is he going to live? And he said, I don't know. And in that moment, that's when I started to panic, because remember, I told you he was a 20-year firefighter and paramedic, professional firefighter and paramedic. He has seen the worst of the worst. He's seen and he was a flight medic overseas for the military. So he's seen some pretty dire situations and has enough medical knowledge to know what's going on that I don't. So when he said, I don't know, I looked back at the lady over the desk and I said, what else do you need? She said, I think I've got everything that I need. And I said, good. And I got up, y'all, I lost it walking out of that emergency room. I walked through the emergency room, but just back out the doors. And I went around the side and I collapsed. I can't even tell you what I was thinking at that point, but I literally began to intercede for my son in a way that I've never done before. I don't know if you've ever cried out to God in desperation to the point that it is moans and groans, grunts. There are no words. I couldn't form words. I couldn't say words. I could not grasp the thoughts that needed to be happening at that point. I literally had to lean in and rely on the Holy Spirit to intercede for me and on our behalf, because I could not come up with words. I literally was bawling, groaning, moaning in desperation. And I do remember I kept saying, you can't take him. You can't take him. Please don't take my son. Now, looking back, he can take him, and he was his first. And I understand that. But in that moment, I was begging God. And immediately there were people all around us. There were people all around us. It was almost like as soon as I walked out of the emergency room and kind of collapsed, I immediately had, I don't know, 6 or 7 people around me. And they were people from our church that had already heard and had gotten up there. And I remember they were just putting their hands on me and they were just praying too. They weren't trying to ask me questions. They weren't trying to hug me. They weren't trying to console me. And I appreciated that. They were literally just praying with me and putting their hands on me and just letting me know, hey, we're here and we love you. And we're going to be praying on behalf of Addison and you as well. There were three things I didn't want to hear. I didn't want to hear brain bleed. I didn't want to hear UMC. And I didn't want to hear we really need to airlift. See, I have a cousin that we've experienced all of that with. He is bedridden. He cannot do for himself. He has 24/7 supervision. He can't even feed himself. He can't bathe himself. He can't dress himself. He's literally in a bed. He can't all day. He can't walk, and it's from a TBI. It's from a traumatic brain injury. And so the doctors come out, and the first doctor that came out is talking, and I'm listening. I'm sitting on the ground, and I'm looking up to him, and I'm listening, and it was like Charlie Brown's teacher. I'm looking at him. I can hear him. I can see him, but I could not understand anything he was saying. And he finally got done saying all the gibberish he was saying. And it might not have been gibberish. I shouldn't be condescending like that. It may not have been gibberish, but he got done talking and said, I don't understand what you're saying. I said, can you just tell me what you're trying to say? The next thing I remember is him and another doctor coming back out, and I understood what they were saying. And they said, 2 small brain bleeds, he needs to go to UMC, and we need to airlift him, but the ceiling is too low and they won't approve it. So we're going to have to transport him by ambulance. And I lost it again. We've got him intubated. We've got a tube in. You're welcome to come in and see him if you want while we get an ambulance ready to transport him. And so I kind of gathered myself. I immediately was like, yes. And I jumped up, I gathered myself, got myself together, and I walked in there. And, surprisingly, seeing him like that was disturbing, but it was almost like after the doctors said what they said and the three things I didn't want to hear, and we go in there, and maybe it was some of the things that the doctor said that kind of gave me peace. Again, it all is a little bit of a blur at this point, but I began to feel a little bit of peace as I got up and got ready to go in there and see him for the first time. And even though that should be very traumatic, it wasn't as traumatic as what I'd already experienced, I guess. And I believe that the interceding and the praying that I had been doing outside and that my friends had been interceding with me for, God gave me a little bit of a peace. Now, there was still a lot of unanswered questions, and I was still a little, concerned of what was to come and that sort of thing. I wouldn't say worried, but just unanswered uncertainties. But we go in and we're waiting for the ambulance. They did try one more time to maybe get clearance to fly him, and that second attempt was shot down as well for the safety of everyone. And so Kyle and Walker had been at a Christmas parade that morning because Kyle is law enforcement, and Kyle was in his law enforcement car. And after the parade, instead of going home and changing vehicles real quick, they just rode to my house to get the hunting gear, and they were going to go back, and then they would change vehicles out and so forth and so on. So when they couldn't airlift him and we're going to have to take him by ambulance, guess who got to escort the ambulance to UMC? His dad and I, because Kyle was in his law enforcement car. Of course, he had to get permission, and he did, and we got that, and we were able to ride together up there escorting the ambulance. Now, we didn't speed or anything like that. Obviously, ambulances have governors on them to a certain point. They still have to be safe and get people where they're going safely, but we were able to have lights on, kind of, get there and get in and out of traffic a little bit faster, which was really cool. So we get to UMC. They immediately take him back. They want to do their own scans and their own tests, which is fine with us. But they were able to confirm everything that KDMC had said and had done. Nothing was new. And the neurosurgeon came in and wanted to do a test to see if he was going to have to monitor brain swelling, draining, if they were going to have to drain anything, and or if they were going to have to perform any surgeries due to the swelling to allow the brain to heal. So this was a very critical point. And when he said, I'm going to wake him up just a little bit, and I'm going to press really hard on his sternum to get him to wake up and talk to me and see if he can follow my commands. Woke him up just a little bit, pressed down on him. Addison opened his eyes, and he asked Addison to squeeze his hand. Addison squeezed his hand, did the other hand, and then he told him to, move his toes. Addison moved his toes, was very responsive to everything. And so the doctor put him back under, and he said that was very good. Based on that, I do not see any reason to have to put a brain monitor on. It doesn't look like we're going to have to do any any kind of surgeries or draining or anything at this point. We'll keep a watch on it, but that's really good. At that point, I gained even more peace. Of course, once we got to UMC, there were people waiting there for us already. My dad and my bonus mom had been in Jackson already, and they went straight to UMC and just waited for us. Um, One of Addison's friends from high school, his mom was in Jackson, and she came. She had even gone and bought him a little Spider-Man, which is something between the two boys. But Bryce, his friend, was like, "You have to go. You have to get this, and you take it to him." And so he had his little Spider-Man in the hospital with him that she brought up there. Several of them that had been with us at KDMC drove and met us up there as well, followed us on up there. And there were probably other people that I'm forgetting that I know just made the trip to Jackson and or were in Jackson and heard about it and stayed in Jackson and came by. And even though they weren't able to get back there to see Addison, they wanted to just let us know that they were there for us. And that meant so much to us. But after the neurology test and the positivity from the neurologist, I was at more peace. And it was at that moment, honestly, that I felt the Holy Spirit say, "He's going to be okay." And I truly felt a blessed peace after that. Of course, during all of this time, I had gotten a text from a dear friend in Brookhaven that also had a house in Jackson. And she just texted and said, "Hey, I heard, here's our address to our house in Jackson. Here's where the key is. There's not a lot of food or drink there, but y'all are welcome to whatever is there. Y'all feel free to spend the night so that you can be close. And let me know if you need anything else. You're welcome to stay as long as you need to." So we were able to, and it was literally 5 minutes from the hospital. The house was. We were able to go. We all stayed. So his brother's girlfriend, and his girlfriend, they were all in Starkville, and they made it to UMC. I don't know, probably 30 minutes after we did. They'd packed a bag and just came on, and so the three of them, myself, my husband, Addison's dad, I think that's it. We all stayed at the house that night. And, it was nice because we were able to stay there, not have to drive all the way back home, because it was midnight before we left. It was around midnight when they finally were going to put him in a room and in ICU, which visiting hours were over, so we couldn't stay. We didn't have to drive an hour back home, then an hour back the next day, and we were able to get a good night's rest, and we were able to all stay together, which was really, really nice because we needed each other. And his bonus mom and sister actually did not stay with us. They went on back home, but they did come back. They were with us as well. The next morning, we are getting ready. They had told me that the nurse would call me around 6 or 6:30, so I had left my phone on so that I could hear it. And sure enough, the nurse called and said that he had had a really good night and nothing new, but that they were about to have a shift change. And after the shift change, they were going to try to take the tube out and unintubate him, if that's the right word. And I said, "Really?" He said, "Yeah, he's doing really good. They're gonna try to wake him up and see if they can take the tubes out today and this morning." And I was like, "Wow, that's amazing." And he said, "Yeah." He said, "So then the nurse on the next shift will call you and let you know." And I was like, "Okay, great. Thanks." So we get up and I share the news with everybody. And so, we're all in good spirits. We're getting ready and we're going to go and grab some coffee at a local coffee shop before we go for visiting hours. I think they started at 9, if I remember correctly. And about 8 o'clock or 8:15, my phone rings again, and it's the new shift nurse, and she says, "Hey, we took the tube out. He's awake. He's talking." And she said, "But he keeps asking if anybody was in the car with him." And I said, "No, nobody was in the car with him. It was a one-car accident, and he was alone." And she said, "Okay, well, I'm going to let him know because that's all he'll say. That's all he keeps asking." She said he also wanted to know if he could call you. And she said, "I wanted to ask you first if it's okay if I let him use my phone to call you." And I said, "Absolutely." So about 3 minutes later, my phone rings and I say hello. And he says, "Hey, Mom." And he said, "What happened?" And I said, "Baby, we don't know. We don't know, but you had an accident and you left the road and you rolled over and then you started having a seizure and you We hit your head really hard. And we don't know. And he said, is my car broke? I said, yeah, your car's broke. I said, but we'll be up there in just a little bit. And he said, can I FaceTime you? And I said, absolutely. And so he FaceTimed me and I got to see him. And he was awake. His eyes were open. He looked normal. He was talking. And it was just like God whispered and said, I told you he was going to be fine. He was. And to make a long story short, he was released from ICU after having 2 small brain bleeds, TBI, like 72 hours after the accident. Our God is amazing. He is faithful. He is listening to our prayers. Now I realize that God doesn't always answer everybody's prayers the same way, but I am thankful that He's not done with my son. But I tell you that story because I want to talk to you about luck versus blessed. By the way, he's made a full recovery. There are no after effects, none whatsoever. There were no long-term effects. He didn't have to learn to walk again, learn to talk again, nothing like that. Like he literally walked out of the hospital. They did make him wheel most of the way out. He wanted to walk out, but they said, no, we have to wheelchair you out. But then he walked, on his own with no issue. And we had to take seizure medication for, I don't know, 6 or 8 weeks as precautionary. But we didn't experience any other seizures after that. Nothing. God healed him completely and whole. He's whole on this side of heaven. And I'm very specific when I pray for healing on people. I say, your will be done, and I do mean that, and he knows that. But God says, make your request known. And so I do say, but God, we are asking that you heal them this side of heaven. If that's your will, luck versus blessed. In March, we celebrate St. Patrick's Day and people wear green. We have shamrocks and we have leprechauns and we have pots of gold and rainbows and all of that fun, cool stuff. I used to say luck all the time. But somewhere along the way over the years, I don't know when, I really started being convicted about saying the word luck. If you have a relationship with Christ, then it's not about luck. It is about God and being in control. It is about God's sovereign control over everything. I began to, many, 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 many years ago, replace the word luck with blessed. And it's bringing to my remembrance right now that growing up, my grandparents would say, when I would say luck or you lucky or something like that, they would correct me and say, no, it's not about luck. There's no such thing as luck, and it's what God has done for you and it's what God allowed to happen and the blessing from God. And so eventually over the years, I started transitioning from luck to saying blessed. And, the Bible emphasizes God's sovereign control over things. It doesn't really mention luck, but it does talk about divine direction and how God's purpose and plan is ultimately the reason for everything. And if you have faith and you are a part of the Christian faith, then you believe that. Then everything is really a blessing and we are blessed. It's not really luck or chance or circumstances or happenstance, as people will say. So I believe everything happens for a reason, but that reason is because that's what God has ordained. And so Proverbs 16:33, I'm going to read you the NIV version and then I'm going to give you the Message version because I like both versions. I'm not even going to get into the weeds of that. You can go read whatever version you want to read, but Proverbs 16:33 says, the lot is cast into the lap, but its every decision is from the Lord. Now the Message version says, make your motions and cast your vote, but God has the final say. And then my favorite verse is Proverbs 16:9. And the New International Version says, in his heart, a man plans his course, but the Lord determines his step. And the Message version of Proverbs 16:9 says, we plan the way we want to live, but only God makes us able to live it. Now, I want to talk to you very quickly about the blessings of December 2nd. Number one, my husband and I were supposed to be out of town that weekend. I don't even remember what for, but God saw otherwise. And we actually did not go out of town that weekend and we were home. Was that happenstance? Was that luck? No, divine direction. Secondly, Addison's dad and brother were in a Christmas parade that day in another town south of us, and they were in the Christmas parade in his dad's law enforcement car for the lights and the sirens and all of that, and Walker rode with him. The parade was over in a timely fashion to where Addison's dad and brother came to my house. They normally would not have come to my house, and Walker did not have his license at this time. They normally would never come to my house. They very rarely come to our house. I mean, we've invited them over a few times, but like we live 30 minutes apart, okay? They needed to come get hunting gear at my house, and they chose not to go change out vehicles before they came to my house. The timing of me and them coming home, remember I got home at 12:56. Walker called me at 1:03. So between 12:56 and 1:03, Addison had his wreck on the road that his dad would have to go back out of. The road that we'd all just come in on, and then his dad was going to have to go back out of. When they pulled up on the accident, they were kind of just going to move on through because there were a lot of people there already. And Walker said, "Dad, that's Addison's car." So they stopped, and I told you earlier that his dad was able to finish pulling him out of the car. That accident had just happened. The yard, or the embankment of the yard, the people that he wrecked in were home. It was a Saturday. People could have been anywhere. They were home and they were outside. I told you it was raining. They were in the backyard. Why? Divine direction. They heard the accident, and so they went to see, and they were able, as soon as the accident happened, to begin helping and to call 911. Then we get to KDMC. They can't airlift him. They're going to have to escort him in the ambulance. But his dad is in a police car with lights, whose boss gave him permission to escort the ambulance. And I feel like I'm forgetting so many of the other little details. I should have read over my notes before I made this video, but y'all get the point. Then, without asking, God provides a house 5 minutes from the hospital for us to stay, to be close. Not to mention, he then allows Addison to be discharged less than 3 days later from ICU with no long-term lasting effect. It's just muscle memory to say, man, he was lucky. Man, that was luck. Man, y'all are lucky that y'all had a Christmas parade that morning. Man, y'all are lucky that y'all didn't go out of town. Man, y'all are lucky that he happened to be in his police car and he didn't go home and change out vehicles. Man, you're lucky that Walker forgot his hunting gear and he had to come to your house. Man, y'all are lucky that, and the list can go on. Y'all are lucky those people were home. Y'all are lucky they were outside and heard it. Y'all are lucky that the paramedics let Chasten ride in the ambulance to help hold him down. Man, y'all are lucky this, y'all are lucky that. No, I want to challenge you that every time you get ready to say the word luck, that you replace it with blessed or blessing, because that's what it is. Because God is in control. He is in sovereign control of everything. And God gives divine direction. If you are a believer, you have the Holy Spirit living inside of you. God uses the Holy Spirit to nudge us about things. And he allows things to happen to redirect your path. That's that divine direction. We didn't go out of town. We were supposed to be out of town. Can you imagine me being out of town and getting a phone call that my son has been in a wreck and they don't know if he's going to live? I can't. And God knew I needed to be here. That's not luck. That's not happenstance. That is a divine direction, divine purpose. And I know I'm forgetting other details of that day. And maybe if I think of them, I'll come on and give them to you. I want you to challenge yourself. Read Proverbs 16:33 and Proverbs 16:9 and think about that. Think about things in your life that you normally would attribute to luck or happenstance, or, well, that wouldn't have happened if, it wouldn't have happened if God didn't want it. And it wouldn't have happened if God wouldn't have made divine direction or divine redirection of your course, or divine redirection of someone else's actions that cause your reactions. I mean, the list goes on and on. Everything that happens in your life is from God. He is sovereign, and he is in sovereign control of everything. And I am so thankful and I'm so blessed that he was in sovereign control that day on December the 2nd, 2023, and that he saw fit to save my son's life and to make him whole and to recover him wholly here on this side of earth. We are blessed beyond measure, and we need to attribute all of that to Christ, all of that, because he is the one that gives us the blessings. I challenge you today, read those scriptures and begin replacing the word luck and lucky with blessed and blessing. And be more mindful of the blessing that He gives you every single day, even in the smallest details.